Good Samaritan.
Welcome. I'm having issues with camera already.
Look at that.
Here we are.
No, we are.
Welcome to the Steadfast podcast going beyond Sunday. And we have a panel again, the panel of experts ready and willing to take your questions and comments. Still trying to figure out our camera. There we go. We are set. We try to do this in many different ways, but we want to go beyond Sunday to just talk about what matters most. Some things we don't get to on our Sunday service. We're in and out doing some different things. And so it's nice just to have this time to dive in a little bit deeper into what we covered on the Sunday. And then also hopefully get to your questions. Please post, comment, anything. We will try to leave a section at the end to go through any questions or comments that you might have in regards to this podcast. So I'll turn it over to Nate, our pastor, talk a little bit about going beyond. We're right in the series. If anybody hasn't been with us on the Sundays, we are in Nehemiah. We're going through the study and just talking about what does that mean for us today, and what is that action that we can draw from what Nehemiah did to our lives in today. So let's go through kind of what we just talked a little bit about on Sunday, and then we'll dive into maybe going a little bit deeper into
Sure.
discussion.
Yeah. Well, so we had Josiah Solden came and preached this week, so he had the message. But the message is from Nehemiah chapter 2. It's kind of the second half of that message. And we kind of talked about last week, or even in here last week, about doing the hard thing and how that Nehemiah was faced with that idea of he had to do something that maybe he didn't really want to do, or maybe definitely that he had some fear around. And this week we kind of talked about he gets started with the whole process. He goes to Jerusalem. He surveys the city walls, what's left of them, and he talks to the leaders there. Kind of inspires people to get started with the work. And Josiah kind of talked about the things that Nehemiah had that enabled him to start this work and tackle this task that was kind of almost insurmountable. It was a big job, and it seemed like it was something that maybe you couldn't do, wasn't able to be accomplished. And so he talked a little bit about that, just about he had the hand of God with him. It says that the hand of God was with him. He had prayed. He has the people there agree to help, and that's kind of a big one of where he's God's with him. He tells the people about how God's hand has been on him and how he moved the king's heart to provide the resources, and then the people are kind of inspired by that, and they commit to starting rebuilding the wall. And so yeah, I mean, that's kind of in a nutshell what we talked about. Definitely some more beyond that, but what did you guys get from Sunday?
Well, I think it's a great, this whole book of Nehemiah is a great study in leadership, and I guess godly leadership, to be specific, because as we've seen, Nehemiah, before he even embarks on this, he goes to God and prays and say, for a long time, as we've talked before he ever even sets out. But he also takes time to plan, and I think this section is where we see him actually. Now he's got boots on the ground, right? He's looking at the wall and thinking, surveying it to try to assess what really needs to be done. And then, so again, I think it's just and then when he does go to the people, the leaders that are there, he tells them, well, God has talked to me, or God has directed me to do this. But, oh, by the way, the king, gave me papers, so we got all the material we need. We got, you know,
Yeah.
we've got, you know, help if we need it in terms of supplying what we need. So, and you know, God orchestrates them to say, "Yep, okay, let's go do it." It's pretty cool.
That is pretty cool. Anything else that kind of just stood out in the message?
Yeah, there were several things. Actually, it was a very powerful message. It was very pointed and convicting.
Oh.
He even called us out when we were looking down at our Bibles, which I was doing. And
I noticed that.
you did notice? Yeah.
I
I was trying to hide.
I pointed.
Oh, you okay? So that's how he knew, because
Yeah,
I'm like heads down, and because I was convicted in that moment. Like seriously, I was not looking at my Bible. I was convicted. So just being open here. And then he says, and some of you have your heads down. I'm like, oh, so I got my head out. And from then on, I kind of tried to make it a point to do that. But some of the things, so not to go into all the things I was convicted about, that was a lot of them. But one of the things I thought was so cool, and it's sticking out in the Bible to me a lot more these days, even just as I've been preparing for our life group on Thursday night with David and Goliath. But it's the idea of he will do this, or we will do this, and he will do this. Like there is this, we both have, like, God is faithful to in his covenant to us, and if we obey him, he is faithful in return, which is just a incredibly cool relational concept. But the God of heaven, and this is in Nehemiah in chapter 2 at the end of it, the God of heaven will give us success. Therefore, we as his servants will arise and build. And I think that's super cool. That's like incredible faith and courage. And that's like, God will give us success and we will do it. And there's a responsibility there for us. And I just think that is so cool. And that was one of the biggest things I got from that message. But also, maybe it's a hot topic, but maybe we could talk more about willing to get our hands dirty, because that was one of the things he was saying. And it is a little bit of a hot topic, because the question is, well, what does that mean?
Yeah.
What does it mean to get our hands dirty?
What does it mean?
Because in some cases, to me, getting our hands dirty, there will probably be people that don't like that, both in the church and outside the church. Like, if we're going to get our hands dirty, what does that look like? Where does that go? So anyways, that's my thoughts.
Well, we could talk about that actually from a hot topic
That is the hot
because-
topic right now.
because it is an interesting point you bring up with getting our hands dirty. We can essentially say that is a individual, like, what is my individual calling?
Mhm.
And sometimes that does mean you get your hands dirty, but then that also is, in this case, collectively, like what he was saying is, when he got people together to build the wall, like it was a collective endeavor.
Yeah. And what does it look like?
So
Yeah.
yeah, great hot topic we will get to. I will say we do have a question.
Okay, great.
All right. Pertains to this. And this is in verse 19, chapter 2, verse 19. And it says, basically the opposition, right? Yep. So there was 3 kind of groups that were kind of in opposition, and it said they jeered at us and despised us. So the question really is, how did Nehemiah deal with kind of that ridicule and opposition? And thank you, Cheryl, for that question.
Yeah,
So
that's a great
just gonna
question.
throw that one out there right away.
Is she our first question?
How
Is she our first question ever?
We had one on
I think we had one
2
other one.
podcasts ago. We had
Well,
one.
you did when you were with
Oh yeah, right. Get the distinction.
Not that one.
So no,
That's very circular. You just answer.
It's
so
thank you, Cheryl. And it's interesting that she's on the same wavelength that I am, because that was as I'm reading this and thinking about it, the answer is in the next verse, because he answers them and he says, that God in heaven will prosper us, as you said, and therefore his servants will arise and build. But he's talking to the naysayers, you have no heritage or no right or memorial in Jerusalem. In other words, they weren't from there. They didn't have any skin in the game, but they're just,
Yeah.
throwing shade on Nehemiah and those who were there, saying, "Oh, what are you doing? This is crazy. What are you doing here?"
Yeah.
And you see that in our world today. I remember this is a long time ago, but when our son and our daughter-in-law decided to get married, and at that time Sam was still in college, and his bride to be had just graduated. And I'm like, you're crazy. You guys don't have any money. You don't have a job. What are you doing? They're like, well, God, we just trust God. And at that point, I was still a baby Christian. And I'm like, God, yes. I just didn't, I mean, but they trusted God, and he's blessed their marriage. But, I think it's interesting that in the case of Jeremiah, even though he had never lived in that city, his relatives did, and that was his heritage. That was his connection, his wanting to restore the legacy of his people. So
Yeah.
And I think about like what is the practical application of that kind of for us, I guess, because it's an excellent question, and the question goes beyond just what we read here, and the fact that as we apply Nehemiah and this whole story to our lives, when we are despised and mocked, and and so like one example I could just off the top of my head I'm thinking of is like if you are rebuilding, maybe you're rebuilding your home, like not physically, I mean rebuilding your home spiritually. There's going to be attacks from, well, why don't you allow that in your home, or why don't you do this, or I don't, or whatever the case may be. And then um we have a responsibility, I think, to kind of rebuke that evil, if you will. Like that has no place in our home, just the same as way as Nehemiah is saying, you have no right here, you have no memorial here. Like this is our domain. And it's going to be like for our home, it's going to be a Christ-centered domain. Um, and I don't say that from a place where I've done a great job at that. You know what I mean? But as we go through life and we go, hey, we need to rebuild these portions of our life, or rebuild, spiritual aspects, maybe even in our church. Like there's going to be attacks, and then how do we handle them? That one's a tough one, and I'm thinking of it from a practical application. I don't have an answer for all of those. It's even harder, I think, in the church because there's different opinions,
Sure.
for lack of,
Oh, sure. Well,
but
and it's interesting too, like when he calls those three guys out and they said, you don't really have, this is our work and you don't really have a share in it. You're going to see later in Nehemiah that these guys they want to have influence in the city of Jerusalem, in the people of Israel. They work very hard to have influence with those people. And just the fact that Nehemiah is saying, hey, we don't want you to have part of this, because in the future, we don't want you to say, hey, we helped you get where you are. We want to say, no, God helped us get where we are. And I think I mean, there's some really good parallels with that too, of, I know there's a lot, and not downplaying, but there are a lot of churches that use a lot of very secular methods to get people in the door. And I think there's, it's a fine line of, we need to in some ways be relevant enough that the culture listens to us, but in other ways, when we take those things that are very secular and we pull them into what we do as a church, and then we want to say, well, this is the Lord's work and you didn't really have any part of that there are issues arise with that. When we say we bring people in through methods that are, or practices or things that we do that are outside of maybe what God's planned, or how He's done things, and then we say, well, now that you're here, it's almost like the bait and switch kind of thing, right? Of like, now that you're here, I know that's not what you got you here, but now that you're here, maybe we're not as okay with that kind of thing. So I think I think there's some good application of that too, of Nehemiah just from the very beginning saying, hey, you don't have a part in this. We don't want you to have a part in this because we understand that if you have a part in it, then down the road you're going to have some say so and what goes on here and what we do, and that's going to be a problem.
That's a great point.
You
Well,
know?
I think there's part of it too, is that when you look at the comments from these guys, they're laughing at them and despising them. So in essence, they've got kind of a negative attitude, right, towards this whole thing. And I'm sure Nehemiah and the other leaders, after having surveyed the damage, are like, "Whoa,
Yeah.
what did we get ourselves into here?" But at that point, there's no place for stinking thinking. I mean, you got to go into it with the right attitude, and I think that's where Nehemiah is like, "Hey,
We're
God,
moving
God
ahead.
has called us to this. We're going to trust Him. We don't need you guys here stinking us up with your negative attitude. So just
Yeah.
be on your way, so to speak."
No, I think that's really good. Like it is that, and and that's something that when you're in church, and I've been in lots of different churches through the years, but it's really easy when something in the church isn't going the way you want it to go, for you to slip into a negative aspect of, okay, these people aren't doing things the way that I want to do things, and now I'm gonna, instead of us being united in purpose and moving forward, now we have this negative aspect, and pretty soon you have divisions forming, and you have the work not moving ahead because you've got people that are on this side saying you're not doing it the way I want you to do it, and maybe that is the better way, maybe it's not.
Mhm.
But it's what you said with the attitude of like, it's not the attitude of we're moving forward with purpose, it's the attitude of I don't like the way that X, Y, or Z is being done, even if it's being done for the right purpose, even if it's not being done correctly sometimes. It is that idea of like, how do you move things forward? How do you approach that in the right way so that it is moving forward and it's not holding the work back? And it's a tough thing. I mean, I'm guilty of being on that side of stuff too, where it's like, I don't like the way this is going, and I'm gonna throw the brakes on something just because it's maybe not what I think we need to be doing. So it's a good call out there too of how we approach stuff.
Well, and so what I'm hearing is one, Nehemiah stood on God's promises, or at least what God told him. So there is this in the midst of opposition. He already spent the time in prayer. He already spent the time waiting for God. God answered, knew God answered, started going forward, and then he can stand on those on what God told him because he already
Mhm.
humbled himself, submitted himself, and just said, God, you work here. And he's seen God work
Mm-hmm.
through the king already.
Yes.
And
Yes.
so he, at that moment, could stand on God's word. And I think that's where we can take from in our today is how dependent are we on that time in prayer, that time with God? How much do we know about God's word and what he's called to us today to stand on it in the midst of opposition? Because I think if I just look back on some of the things that I felt called to do, and then some opposition came and different things, it is easy to wobble in it to be like, oh, or if it doesn't go the way you think it should go, then be like, maybe I got that wrong, or but it seems like to stand on the promises, stand on what God told you to do, and then be unashamed of it when people come and try to.
Yeah, I mean, it's really clear that Nehemiah understands his purpose and calling from God, and he's rooted in that, and he's not going to be dissuaded from doing those things.
Well, it's like you said, not only did he felt the calling from God directly, but then he saw how God had worked through the king to orchestrate all this help that, a man that doesn't believe in this God God is moving him, and so Nehemiah saw God working through a quote unbeliever to help accomplish the task that God had set him out to do,
Yeah.
right? And so that had to be like
Yeah.
double assurance for Nehemiah to say, not only did I hear God tell me, but I've seen what he's done through the king.
Yeah.
And we have the quote worldly support
Sure.
of the king.
Yeah.
All the material and stuff, you know.
I think
So-
it's a little bit like what we talked about a couple weeks ago, is that idea of faith being exercised. And when you exercise your faith and you see God respond in that, how that grows your faith even more. Like you see at the beginning of this narrative, when he goes before the king, he's shaking in his boots. And now we're at the end of the chapter, and we've got these people that are powerful. They're not the king, but they are powerful people. And you don't see that same response from Nehemiah, um, in that he's seen what God's able to do, and he gets to this point, and he's like, God will, like Chris was saying, God will assist us in doing this, and so yeah, I think that's
About how many
typical.
year process was this for Nehemiah
From
traveling?
which to which to get there?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, from the time he from the time that he starts to the time when he goes before the king is 4 months, and then it says, I don't know if it gives a direct timeline here of how long it takes Nehemiah to get there, but you get kind of the impression that it.
Weren't they talking about different generations being allowed to go into paradise or promised land? Or was that a different?
You're thinking of
That was
the
in
numbers.
Yeah, that was the numbers thing. I mean, there's definitely has been different group. Like when you get to Nehemiah is not the first group of people that went back to Jerusalem.
I think later in the book it does give you like when they get done.
When they get done, there's the date. Yep.
It says,
Yep.
and it was like wasn't very long relative to the again it's all manual labor, right?
Yes.
I mean, it's not like they had cranes and backhoes. I mean, they were doing it all by hand.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the whole completion of the wall from the time they start doing it to the time the city is completely enclosed is only 52 days.
Yeah.
So from the time they
Yeah.
start the work till the time the wall is enclosed and there's a specific height that they talk about, but
Yeah, I
the
think
the walls are repaired 52 days to repair a wall around the city, so it was completely enclosed,
wow.
which is incredible. I mean,
Yeah.
a month and a half that you're gonna rebuild a city wall.
Well, wall being attacked.
Yeah, right.
While being attacked. Yeah. Yeah. So
And I saw it earlier too. It only took 3 days when he got there. He spent 3 days deciding exactly how to do it,
Yeah.
Yeah.
which is also
Surveying.
really fast.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, you probably know, Pat, 'cause- but that's like
a
that's
3-day
like
survey. of an
3-day
entire
survey,
city.
yeah.
You're right. It does say 3
Yeah.
days. Yeah, that's
Air
good.
Force, that took years.
Yeah.
3 days.
So much
3
paperwork.
days and a night because he went out.
Yeah. Went out at
Yeah.
night. Well, it is interesting too. It's like there's planning involved here, but there's also action involved here. And it's that balance between we're planning, we're trusting God for the outcome of what's going on, but we're actually acting, and it's not we're laying down a plan that's going to take us 5 years to enact.
Mm-hmm.
He does have a plan that he's kind of working from, it seems like, but he's also like, when we get there, we're getting stuff done, and it's a good example, I guess, of like attacking things with purpose, but at the same time actually moving on them and doing something with them.
And I'm going back to today and getting back to the hot topic eventually, but
Do it now. What is hot topic?
the time thing, the walls
Action.
went up fairly quickly,
Yeah.
but that's kind of our life. The walls go up, not believing the naysayers. We know we're going to get, if you're believing and following scripture and what is the truth, we've kind of discovered, at least I have recently, how much this actually makes sense. We build up these walls, but we can tear them down real quickly by the naysayers.
That's for sure. Yeah, we tear down our own walls pretty quick.
Well, yeah, it's usually us that do it. I'm a late bloomer in
No.
learning here.
Maybe that's a hot topic.
But they can be rebuilt if you start that relationship with God. I'm at that point, I'm still building it. We all got to build it every day, which leads us just to the things and the people that are going to try and tear us down. And I just believe, I have to believe, because what else do I have to believe in that is the truth right now these days? Why would you doubt that by you starting a relationship and knowing what God did, giving his only son the way he did, all those sins can be taken care of for you. Now you just got to work on the everyday of not letting people tear your walls down.
I think you're hitting on something that's really important there, Murray, because again, from a faith standpoint, we all have to come to a point where the walls, where the city's destroyed, where it's like, I got nothing.
Mhm.
God, I don't know what to do. Again, whether it's, alcohol or, money or whatever it is that's your sin of choice, at some point you have to come to an end and say, God, I can't conquer this myself. I need you. And I think, and so your life sometimes has to be laid to ruin before you can then surrender and say, okay, God, I need your help to rebuild this.
And if you're surrounding yourself with people that believe, they will help you get the answers because the Holy Spirit is working amongst all of us.
I do think that's a really interesting and cool part of this story. And I think just of the story in general, when you talk about you come to the end of yourself and you're trusting that God is going to rebuild. But I mean, we're in such a individual society where we're like, I will rebuild my wall, right?
Yeah.
But Nehemiah's not like that. And not that this is a direct correlation, but Nehemiah's not like that. He's like, we as a community, we as a group have to rebuild this wall, and I'm not going to be able to do this on my own. And when we step into faith, we live in a very Western society where everything is me, 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 me. And even sometimes that then spills over to our faith. We say, well, ultimately it is a decision that I have to make. But the moving forward part is always designed throughout all of Scripture, is always designed to be done in community. Like, you look at the disciples, you look at the early church, you look at all of those things moving forward, and there's all of it, right? Yeah. Even to God's community is the idea that there is a community aspect. God uses his people collectively to grow his people individually. Mm-hmm. And that's such an interesting part of the way that he works and the way that he uses us in other people's lives, the way he uses other people in our lives, and how that is there's value and importance to that, and it's a lot harder going at it by yourself or without very many people on board with you. So I thought that's a good kind of.
Well, I've got a hot topic segue. Okay. Being that I don't know if you guys watched the national championship game last night, but awesome game, mm-hmm. Right? But I guess the point I want to make is, when you look at Indiana and what they've done in 2 years, that program was like the worst. They had the losingest program ever. And granted, the transfer portal and NIL helped a lot. But my point and all, to bring it back to a spiritual discussion, is it just shows you that when you put your mind to something, and the people that the players that they brought in were nobodies. They were the best guy on some Division II or FCS team.
Yeah.
Now they were good players, but they weren't the high, 5-star. I think Fernando Mendoza coming out of high school was a 2-star recruit, and now he's a Heisman Trophy winner and a national champion. It's just, again, it's just a worldly picture of, yes, you can do it. And I don't know if there's, within that team, I'm sure there's probably some guys that have faith, but again, I think it relates to what Nehemiah is doing here. Is he's got a bunch of nobodies there that are willing to jump in and do the hard work,
Mm-hmm.
and it's just kind of interesting to see how
Yeah.
that sometimes can happen
Yeah.
in the world that we live in, right?
Well, last 2 minutes of the game, how many, as they pan through the crowd and through the players, how many did you actually see praying? Like they're one more, give me one more. Like, I mean that it's everyone can say, whether they believe or they not, but when it comes down to it, when they want something bad enough or when they're in a situation,
Yeah.
they realize I don't have control over it and something else does.
Has to step in.
There's a lot of praying going on.
And I'm hoping the praying is not for getting dirty hands on the other side of what we've been talking about.
Oh, Murray wants to transition.
This
He's going
almighty dollar.
Oh,
yeah.
that,
Oh,
yeah.
It's
Well,
Again,
like this.
listen,
I just hit the lottery.
I don't want to spiritualize college football.
Yeah,
but
right.
It just, again, it's a current event, and I just thought
Well,
it kind of
it's-
fits with
it
what we're
does.
talking about.
well,
It
and their
is.
coach is a very faith-based individual, and also extremely confident. I mean,
Yeah.
that dude is confident. That's why he came in there and has done and has been able to do with that team, obviously, and with other coaches as well. But if you ever watch him, I mean, there's all those memes on him and stuff
yeah.
because he's so serious.
Stoic, yeah.
He's so stoic,
Yeah.
and that's because he has a job to do.
Oh,
And I think he's an incredible example. I really do.
Yes.
I think he's an awesome coach, and he came in there and he turned it around. And I think it's cool. So is Mendoza
his
too. Mendoza,
facial
right, the quarterback.
expressions.
He's-
The coach facial
I-
expressions.
Oh, he's awesome. Yeah,
I thought
he's great.
It was interesting right there towards the end that offensive lineman had a false start, and they showed Signetti on the sideline. It was like laser beams coming out of his eyes on that guy, and the guy's like, "I did. I'm
Yep.
sorry," but he knew he screwed up. But boy, Signetti just like,
And just to clarify, not the football thing on the dirty hands.
The
It's-
money.
Well, it's not even that. It's just when we were talking about getting your hands dirty is being called to action.
Mm.
But if you're not believing, there's a lot of people wanting to get their hands dirty. Like
For other reasons.
like you used to refer to mafia getting your hands dirty and those
Okay,
type
gotcha.
of things.
Yeah.
Which is sinful things. You either believe, follow that path, or you don't.
Hmm.
And the devil's advocate in me says there's a lot of prayers on the other side, or a lot of people, faith-based people, that
Sure.
know their job, that are all in and not getting the results that say Signetti did,
yeah,
or even on the other side, they prayed the exact same prayer of let me have one more shot.
Yeah.
And they threw an interception. So I mean,
yeah.
like you have to weigh that in the sense of that's not faith in the sense of what we're talking about, in the sense of what is God calling you to do. And even in the midst of disappointment, in the midst of things, that doesn't necessarily mean that you're not close to God, or you're not hitting
Yes.
the mark
Just-
or his
Just
calling.
because you didn't win a national championship doesn't mean you weren't doing God's work,
And
right?
because you lost, you can't blame God because you're in the national championship praying.
Yeah, you'd be the bottom. You could be
Yeah.
the bottom
You
team
could have
that
been
didn't even have a
Indiana
shot at it.
2 years
Could have
ago.
been Nebraska.
But I've been on that end of praying. I just need a good game and don't get hurt. And we should make it to state. Guess who had the worst game of his life in the districts to get the state. Didn't score a point. We were up 18 at half and lost by 3, and I didn't score a point. The captain of the team.
Yeah.
It doesn't work out. You can't blame God. And when I finally turned my life around, I forgave myself over all those failures that I thought depended on me. What does it matter if you make it to state or not? Just live your life the way you're supposed to, believe. Forget the rest, ask for forgiveness, and then follow that plan every day in your thoughts and prayers. And it just becomes so much easier if you start thinking that way. Yes, I'm still a sinner. I'm still going to pray for things, but I could care less who won last night. It's not affect me one bit. But
Well,
it's sure fun to watch.
and this, since we're 40 minutes in, this is a good transition to the
It's
hot
good.
topic
It's
Oh,
good.
the actual hot topic.
The actual hot topic.
of moving, because you're getting
That we
there.
just
Then
decided
moving
on.
Yes.
into what is the hot topic again, Chris? I'll let you.
Well, the hot topic was, so we talked on Sunday, or Josiah said, are we willing to get our hands dirty? And that's a theme here in Nehemiah. So the question is, okay, then what does that look like? And you brought it up, a very good point. What does it look like individually, and what does it look like collectively? And what, because there's probably some aspects of that where you're like, well, that's too dirty. You can't do that. Or you've really hurt my feelings
Yes.
now. So what does getting our hands dirty look like? I mean, obviously we're not like, parading around with offensive posters like some churches have in the past, getting their hands dirty, right? But what are we doing?
Yeah.
What does that look like?
I think we're doing it right now. We're building a relationship with God. You're an individual, but we are grouping together to do something. I never thought I'd be doing this 2 months ago.
Mm-hmm.
And so darn good at it too.
And,
This is the only reason why people are watching.
but
I think it goes back to exactly what
how many?
what Nehemiah did. Is I think it's a matter of corporate prayer, and I'm saying this in context of our church body, right?
Yeah.
Again, we've gone through this transition, and I thought that Greg and you did a great job of just kind of giving an update on that. But it's like, okay, and I'm guilty of this. I think I've even confessed to you, for months, I was just like sitting back like, all right, elders, what are we doing? Give us a report. Tell me.
Sure.
Instead of saying, what can I do to help get
Yeah.
us where we need to go? So I think the first thing is just have an open heart and a willingness to be a part of the conversation, maybe to start with. And then when there's actually an action plan, then being willing to step into the, rather than just pointing out the problems,
Yeah.
is be willing to say, that's a problem and I'm willing to fix it. I'm going to be that person I'm going to build that section of the wall.
Yeah.
Right. And we'll see that next week in the,
one person, one stone at a time.
yeah.
By inviting.
And so I think it starts with just prayer and then a willingness to be engaged and take that action, take that step of faith.
I think there's an aspect of it too when you look at if we're answering the hot topic in relation to Nehemiah, which maybe we are, maybe we aren't, but you look at all the people that jump in and join this work, all of them have other professions.
Mm-hmm.
None of them they're not wall builders,
Right.
They're not construction people. They're all people that have farms and homes and businesses. And for the next 52 days, these people are single-mindedly pursuing this one thing. And I think, if I'm thinking about what does it look like to get my hands dirty, I think some of the what it looks like to get my hands dirty is intertwined with some types of sacrifice of saying, yeah, there's a lot of things that I would like to do, but here's what I'm called to do in this, and it's a little different for me because I'm paid ministry. I'm here, right? But that idea of like, there's a lot of things I could do with my time, because if I'm honest, they're probably our most valuable asset that everybody has in our society is our time, right? Of saying, hey, if God's call is for us to build Steadfast the way He wants us to build it, that's going to require some, on our part, some sacrifice to do. We can't say this is something that's super important. We can't. It's the idea of getting your hands dirty, right? It's if we say something's super important, then our actions should reflect that it's super important. And to me, that's what getting my hands dirty is. Like if I am convicted that something is a calling that God has called me to move or do, then that needs to lead me into actually doing something with it, right? It's maybe not specific enough, but it's that idea of like, if it really is important, then I really should do something about it. And if I'm not that way, then Josiah talked a little bit about it. Like, yeah, it's good to say I'm going to pray about something, and then praying is important. But then when you're called to do something, doing is important too. So anyway,
What
that's
if
my
you?
take on it.
What if you are?
Go ahead.
Sorry, just a. What if you are what if you feel like you're being called into more like involvement in ministry, but you are convicted by how the American church does things? So you're called into it, but you are extremely convicted. I'm talking for myself. Okay.
Sure.
I am very convicted about the way that the American church runs traditions, protocols, and all kinds of things that are absolutely not scriptural and take away from God's word. And I see that everywhere across the United States, but I want to be more involved.
Well, I think that's the difference. I guess you can comment on that.
No, go ahead.
Jump in. I was just saying that I think that's the difference from our context, from what Nehemiah is going through. That's one thing. They're united in purpose in Nehemiah.
Yeah.
All for the purpose of building this wall, and they all go to it. Here we're trying to kind of take either I'm individualistic, where you pointed out, I'm individualistic, or I'm steadfast. We may take that just a little bit further and say that's steadfast. But the reality is we have so many believers around here and so many churches. And how much are we collectively as believers praying, fasting, and deciding what does God have for us as believers versus
and getting together with them
versus each kind of individual. And I think that might be where we're going, even maybe a little further. But like,
I'm going.
I mean, it's an interesting one.
No further.
If you look at scripture, I mean, if you look at the New Testament, there's different churches in different cities. There's different communities in different cities. I mean, you look at Colossians. There's a separate church that he addresses. There another church in that town. He's like, the people that meet in this house, here's instructions to you, and the people that meet here, there's instructions to you. So there might be some separation.
What did they call them back that day? Clans, different clans.
They didn't call them clans. They called it the church that is in, or the church that meets in. They refer to where they met, right? Because we are. I mean, to your point, Luke, we are all, everyone who believes in Jesus Christ. We're all part of the same church, right? We are one church, right? The idea of the church universal is a thing, and there's a calling to that, but there's also then a calling to the individual church, that body that He's put you in. When it says we're members of one body, those are specific letters to specific groups of people, but it is a there's a broader context too of the people in one church are really good at giving, you know, and the people in another church are really good at the church in Berea. They're really good at digging into the word. And all of those parts kind of fit together into this larger church. So how do you put those things together? And how do you make them work together and not separately? Because I think the more separate we become, uh, that's an issue too, right?
I think it starts with having a very solid basis of why and what is the purpose of and
Mhm.
of in the mission of the church,
Yeah.
right? And that we can all have that even as Christians, we have a purpose,
Yeah.
right? Of what what we're called to do. But you're right, every church body is going to be kind of a summation of the parts. And so if it's again a very mission-minded church, then that's going to drive some of the programming that you do. Or if you're very, you know, we want to plant churches, and again, not saying we should do that. I'm just saying there are churches
Yeah.
that's kind of their thing, right? Or we're all about the praise and worship, and we want to do that really, And again, I'm kind of getting off. I'm focusing on individual parts of what I think you're talking about, Chris. But I think that what I'm getting at is that collectively we have to try and decide what is it that we want to do as a church body to fulfill our mission, which is to glorify Christ
Yeah.
and make him known.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, that's kind of the bottom line, I believe, isn't it?
I would say.
I mean, if you get to the core objective of the Christian faith, I mean, the Great Commission was go make disciples, right? So now how we do that in practicality, in terms of how we worship, I think is an important question. I know like our daughter and son-in-law, they spend a lot of time looking at that, and they're picking a church based on how the order of service is like how they do it specifically, and they think there's some things that are very we're called to do, and other things that, like you're saying, that maybe have just become traditions that the church as a whole has kind of glommed onto to say, oh, we need to do that, right? Um,
Well, and
so
I think a little bit to what you're saying, it's just that idea of like, I don't think we need to be hung up on how we do things necessarily as much as why we do things.
yes,
If we're doing things out of tradition without thinking about the why of it, I think there's a danger in that, because then it just becomes
you're just checking a box.
you're just checking a box, right? I think if you're doing things with the why in mind, uh, I don't think there's a I don't think for the Old Testament church there was a prescription of why did we do these things this way, right? So not the church, but the people of Israel in the Old Testament. There's a very specific order that he has them do. But all of those things are reminders, and they're all foretelling, pointing forward to Christ. Like, it's very specific, and there's a very specific way. But then you get to the New Testament, and Christ comes, he fulfills the law, right? And then you look at the epistles, and it's like, whether you observe a day or a festival or a feast, you should only do that out of the conviction that you have. Like, there's not all these prescriptions of you have to do it this way, and if you don't do it this way, you're not doing it right. There's a lot more focus on the relationship that we have with Jesus Christ and him living and dwelling in us. And so I think that's kind of the distinction, because now we've got the Holy Spirit living in us, reminding us, directing us, moving us forward. I think the important the burden of the importance is on why are we doing what we're doing, right?
Yeah.
And the method might look different in different locations, but I don't think the method, there's some instances where we do things as a church, probably out of an order that we've done it or something that's been handed down over time. You know, there's a lot of traditions, and there's traditions in Catholic theology, there's traditions in Protestant theology, uh, and those traditions aren't the gospel,
Yeah.
right?
Right.
So if we're leaning on the traditions and not leaning on the relationship, I think that then we run into some really big issues.
Well, there are certainly distinctives. I mean, when you talk about denominations of Christian churches, there are specific things that are distinctive to that. And question we have to, as individuals, and I think as a body, have to agree on is what are those distinctives that we think are the most important? And I think you said it right, Nate. I think it's why is that important? And not just checking a box. It's there. It should be scriptural. It should be, what has been ordained through that we can as best we can discern from God's word to say this is how the order of worship should be, right?
Yeah.
So, and again, that's why we have 50 bazillion different denominations.
That's a great hot topic. Because that would be getting your hands dirty, is getting rid of those.
Yeah.
But there may be value to that too. You think about it, and I've had this discussion before of like, there are so many denominations. Why in the world do we have all these denominations?
Mm-hmm.
And yet, I think there's people in different denominations that wouldn't even be part of the church necessarily if that denomination didn't exist. I mean, you think there was one church in Jerusalem, right? And what happened to the church in Jerusalem? God split them up and spread them all over the known world. And so there's kind of a balance there of like, where is it that denominationalism is absolutely out there and wrong, and where is it God has multiplied the groups in order to reach the most people? I don't know what the answer to that is. It's good. You're right. It's a good hot topic of like, if we got rid of all of them, would that be the best thing?
I think sometimes we focus on our differences rather than our common, what our common core issues or beliefs are.
Yeah.
And I think that I've heard that before too, is that and that's why it's important to have like, a creed or a statement of faith that says that these are the things that are important. This is why we believe it,
Mm-hmm.
But then how do you put that into actual worship practices? I think maybe what you're talking about, Chris, right?
Well, I am talking about the how, because I think we do the how wrong. And one of those ways is we live in a country where our welfare and like people in need, they're getting their help from the government for the most part.
Yeah.
Okay. And that's because maybe not Steadfast, we meet in a school, okay? But there are plenty of churches around here. When I walk in that door, I'm going to see banners from, I don't know if you know what outreach.com is, but they make a lot of money off of churches selling beautiful things that they put into their churches. And our churches are beautiful, beautiful places with opulence everywhere. It's just gorgeous.
Mm-hmm.
And yet there's people in that service who have a leaky roof or a car that's not getting them down the road. They're struggling financially, or they're struggling with some type of sin, or they're struggling. And we have this beautiful place, and I'm sorry, that's sinful. And that is the how. We're doing it that way.
I don't know. I think I think you're right in that. There is some sinfulness in it. But you look at the temple, there was no more opulent place than that. I mean, and I'm not advocating for the nice things. I'm just saying where is the call? And I totally agree. I'm on the same boat.
You
I'm,
are, yeah.
I'm on board with you, because I'm like, I don't think we need to have opulent buildings
No.
and all this stuff when there are people that have needs.
But people have justified it, and they've said,
Yeah.
but my heart is this or whatever. And you're like,
Sure.
no, you don't justify. That is still the how, and it's still wrong, and it
That's
still
true.
sends a message, regardless of how you might
That's
have
true.
justified it in your own head.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
I'm sorry, that one gets
No,
me fired
I
up.
think it's a good one, and it's a good one of like, and that is it's the how and the why, right?
Mhm.
Why do we
Yeah.
do this? Well, our why says if we do this, we're gonna the justified why says if we do this really well, really nice, we're gonna get more people to come in.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
there's a little bit of a okay.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a legit thing. Like you can get people in the door, but you have to then that why has to be why and how. It's like if you do the one and you neglect the other, then right out the door. If you're doing the if you're doing the one that you should be doing, and God blesses your church, and you've got
Mhm.
extra to go around, and He's called you to some of that stuff, okay, but you better be doing the one before you're doing the other one, And it's a tough one too because, then you get this point of like I've struggled with this, and like my children have struggled with it as well. Of like, okay, if I have anything at all, if I have anything at all, if I have a nice car and somebody down the street can't get to work, do I sell my nice car, or is that something God's blessed me with in order for me to get to work? And there's a tension there, right?
I
Of
understand.
like,
Yeah.
I'm like,
I would agree, though. I think when you talk about social justice and particularly charity, historically the church was the source of charity, but we've allowed the government to step into that void and make it, this secular source of charity
mhm,
that now is just out of control. And then, the local church is more worried about, the, again, don't get me wrong. I mean, hungry kids in Africa, they need food, right? We should support that. If we as a congregation say that's our mission, we're going to do that, so be it. But the reality is there's starving people just down the street.
yeah,
There are people that need a lot that we could, I think that's what you're saying, right?
oh, yeah.
There are
Yeah.
needs all around us that we could minister to and share Christ at the same time that we just aren't.
Well, and
We're not doing it.
I think Steadfast is at this like perfect place for that. I
Yeah,
really do. We have people like Steadfast is full of people just that have a heart for others. And so I'm just as we apply this
Yeah.
to ourselves and to our church body, there's opportunity here that's bigger than any like wall or bigger than any structure or bigger than any um, tradition. This is God's work. I think
Yeah.
we have an opportunity here to just go completely crazy, getting our hands dirty, in the right way.
The church is not the temple.
No, it's not.
And what we're doing in believing is following that faith. And it should be about giving glory to God. Nothing else. None of us. We're the servants, just like we used to be.
Yeah.
So as long as the glory is going to Him, it doesn't matter what we do, as long as we're following in His belief and His path. That's what we're supposed to be. And we're all individuals, so every church is going to be a little different.
Yeah.
Who's the decision makers?
Yeah, and it's good to just step back and think about that too, because it's like Chris was saying, it's really easy to take the why and start justifying things that we're doing uh, that maybe aren't what we're called to do.
I think some of though is good in the sense of when you take a look at where you are at, how best can I make disciples? And so if you look at church, I shouldn't judge.
No.
If you look at churches around here, I think what you're talking about is at certain points in times you're saying if I'm gonna reach people who have everything materially around, at least around from what you can see around us in the greater Omaha area, if you're just taking a look at Gretna. If I went to a multi-million-dollar house with a pair of shoes and said, I'm out here giving a pair of shoes, they'd be like, I got shoes, I don't care. So you take a look at kind of where you're at and how to reach people, I think that's where some of that is coming, is people are like, we're taking, they have everything materially. So now I kind of have to present myself because that's what people are living in. So I gotta present myself, and now it's more about trying to get the relationship with them, trying to get their needs met, in the sense of, we know that there's a hole there from families, or from maybe in a like marriage standpoint, certain things like that. Some of that you have to really have a relationship before someone wants to open up, and so then we kind of back away and we say, well, we got to have all these services in order to bring those people in, because then in the hopes, it's playing the long game. It's playing the long game in the sense of it, the hope is, man, eventually they're gonna plug in. We're gonna know what's really actually going on, and then we can move forward. Now, if you take a look at, like what you're saying, if you go and you take a look at people who don't have shoes, or even if you go into uh, downtown Omaha, like where there's homeless, or just different things, those churches are acting way differently, because, and that you walk into their buildings, they're completely different, to an extent of, at least the, might be some old, because they're older buildings, there might be some crafting and stuff there, but like they're kind of working in a different mindset, because they are there to try to help people right there with what they're at.
It's an issue of proximity.
And so what I'm really convicted about is, how do we get people to step outside of the comfort zone around here, step outside, and even, I'll even talk to myself, stepping outside of my house that I have everything materially, and get them to realize not only their dependence for Jesus, that even though they have everything material, they still have a dependence in Jesus, but then also, to your point, there is actual physical need that's away from us, just a half hour over or whatever, where we can go and serve and not be so consumer driven, in the sense of services, and then, oh, I'll plug out and then just go back to my job and then plug back in. And I think, to your point, Nate, that's where we get, and Pat, that's where we get prayer around, what are we collectively doing, and what is it about, and inviting not just ourselves, or not just people who are looking for a church, but actually inviting churches to come alongside to say, we want to do things differently. Like we want to do things, and we want to see the power of the Holy Spirit move, and not just
But again, we live I mean, again, we're very blessed. We live
right.
in Sarpy County in general, which would include, where Chris lives, a very affluent county. I mean, it's one of the richest counties in the country in terms of just wealth and, I mean, the quality of life and all that, right? So again, if you're in downtown, where there's, next door to the shelter, the mission,
Right.
a whole different opportunity because of proximity.
Right. You do things
Now,
completely different.
again, so I think the question for us is, what does the community of Gretna need? What is the greatest need in Gretna?
Yeah.
To be able to serve and to be the light of Christ to this demographic, right? I mean, now again, there are people that are low income, and I mean, there are people that are homeless. You mean you see once in a while, but I mean, it's not like downtown Omaha. But so I guess the question is, as a church, what is our area that we want to try to serve at within our community? But I'll give you an example, and I think there is a church connected to it, but I think it's kind of a parachurch kind of organization, and it's called, I'm gonna get the name wrong, but it's Chariots of Love, I think is kind of the name of it, I think. But it's basically, their ministry is, they take these old cars. It's kind of like the Teen Challenge. You take an old car, fix it up, and then give it to a young single mom that doesn't have a car to get to work. And it's a whole, I mean, it's a thing. I mean,
Yeah,
it's
Ministry,
grown.
yeah.
I mean, and they do a great work. I mean, but it's not necessarily a church, but it's a faith-based
Yeah.
ministry. I think that's kind of what I think we would need to maybe think about. I don't know. I mean, what's our it, right? Because we can't do everything, but we got to do something. We should do something.
When I was
Nehemiah did one thing. He got a bunch of people together to believe that God told him what they were supposed to do. It's
Yeah.
one person at a time, connecting, using each other's services,
Mhm.
and relying on each other because we believe.
You're gonna say, Chris?
well, I brought up the idea of physical needs,
Mm-hmm.
which I agree is very, 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 very important. That's why I can't
Sure.
stand it when I see just crazy amounts of money spent on buildings and stuff like that. But um, there's also, even in an area which is, we'll call it rich for lack of better, and when Jesus Christ said it's easier for the rich man to enter or easier, sorry, it is easier for a camel to go through the eye of the needle. I'm thinking about that right now because I've been doing a little bit of study on that, and just the idea behind that was that gate, right? I think most scholars believe it was that gate, that the needle gate, and you had to take everything off of that camel to squeeze the camel through that small little hole in the gate. And so we have all this stuff that we don't want to get rid of. And so there is that aspect. And so then we try to cater to that. We try to cater to the people that have all that stuff, and maybe we can get them to release a little bit of it. But there's also a change right now generationally. There's a generational change, and that includes this area where younger people, and maybe it's not just young people, but it's a change in desiring truth. Like above all else, they want truth. So they're going wherever they can go to get that truth. And so it's the physical needs is one thing, but then there is a huge spiritual need gap. And the spiritual need gap is even in the church, where we see in some cases close to a 54% divorce rate. There are families falling apart. There are kids on all kinds of drugs, and I'm talking legal prescribed drugs. I'm not talking about illegal stuff, but there are parents in this nation just feeding their children drugs. And then we're wondering why we have all of these issues. And that's because there is a spirituality gap. There's a gap where we are not answering these needs with Jesus Christ.
Yeah.
And that is in this area. And so there's a whole need on top of that. And that's my thing, is like, none of that stuff that caters to whoever gets us there. None of that stuff gets us there. What gets us there is literal truth, like just being there in that moment, whatever that moment is. And so we got to be. That's why I love breaking down walls of tradition and protocol and everything, because we got to just get to the people.
Yeah.
And that doesn't include outside the walls either. That's people inside the church. Like, we got to get to the people that we're sitting next to. And I'm terrible at it because I'm kind of an introvert and I like to go into the back country and disappear. But we need to be like, we need to be together,
100%.
so that we can meet each other's spiritual needs. Sorry.
No,
Okay. Again,
that is a great.
You're an introvert?
I am an
I
introvert.
don't think so.
Technically, I am. I hide it as well as I can.
But we all are uncomfortable doing these things. That's why it's so hard for people to get involved in things.
Yeah.
But you just gotta little by little
Be okay with awkward.
Be okay with awkward.
Be okay with
That is-
weird.
yes.
They keep inviting you to do messages at the
I know.
beginning of church.
I don't know why.
Because
Because
I'm doing okay.
yeah.
I love I love your passion for that, and honestly, that's where my passion is at too. Of like, how do we impact people with the truth of God's word? How is Steadfast a place where people can go, like, and you identified a lot of the main things. We don't have the physical needs here, but we have the needs in the family realm of family interactions. We have the needs in the realm of for lack of a better term, like emotional health, and a lot of that stems from a lot of the emotional health stuff stems from a lack of spiritual grounding.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that there's no such thing as emotional health. I'm just saying a lot of the problems that we see, and I think the church needs to be at the center of that. And
Yes.
what you said
Yes.
is that the church, and what Pat said, the church over the course of time has handed off the responsibilities that have been assigned to the church. When the church was assigned the responsibility of caring for the needs of the poor and the widow, we have abdicated that to our government. And now we're in this phase of we have real emotional needs, and we're abdicating that responsibility for the church to speak into the whole self of who we are. And we're saying, we're going to send that person off to some counseling group somewhere. And not saying that, once again, don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that there's not a place for that, but I'm saying that the church is abdicating a lot of that to the secular world of saying, we want you to fix that, right? Medicine's the same way. Like, medicine was a church thing. There's a reason that all the churches or all the hospitals are Methodist or Catholic or whatever, because Lutheran, because the churches were who established that, because that was what we were called to do. And now we've given that away to our society rather than speaking and acting in the ways that those are ways to reach out to people. So I think I'm all for. I'm like, let's start taking some of it back. Let's start taking some back.
The question is, what are we going to take back first?
Yes.
Because we can't take it all.
No, we can't take it all. It's got.
I think. But I think we have a unique opportunity because, again, you have this. We asked the question like when we first came to Steadfast, and then a month later we find out that Greg is stepping down as pastor, and we're like, oh man. But I had a great lunch with Greg the other day, and just to understand what God's calling him to do. And he made the point is they're not going anywhere. They're still part of the church. He said, the way he put it to me, I'm preaching to a smaller congregation now. And so when it comes to ministering to broken families or broken spirits of a young person or a single mom or whatever, I think we have a unique opportunity because we have somebody who's being called to that we can come along, we can point them in that direction, but at the same time come alongside them from a congregational standpoint and say, hey, we're here to support you. And if you need some counseling, we got a great guy over here that likes to preach to a congregation of one.
Yes.
Right. So maybe this is just part of God's plan.
I think that's right. That there's a legitimate, like, if somebody has an emotional spiritual problem, directing them to somebody that's going to take them to God and God's word, because
yes,
we can quote unquote fix people, and that's what counseling is. The secular counseling world is out there to do, is to fix people, and people aren't. That isn't fixing people. You can have no abnormal behaviors and you're still not fixed. Right? There's only one thing that fixes us as people, and that's our relationship with Jesus Christ.
Amen.
And as long as we keep that as at the center of our counsel, that's the tool that we have. There's only one person that is able to heal people completely. It's Jesus Christ, right? We can fix their bodies. We can make them cancer free. We can make them disease free. We can do all these things. But if we haven't addressed the actual problem, then we're taking off the top of that, and we're saying, oh, we're gonna fix you as a person, but you're not really fixing anything. You're just making people feel, quote unquote, feel better, or literally feel better. but we're missing the point.
You're fixing the
It's-
symptoms, not,
Yeah, that's a
great
not the
point.
cause.
Yeah.
It has to be each individual's decision. You're either going to start that relationship with God or you're not.
Yeah.
And it starts with a, hey, how you doing? As you're getting gas or
Yeah.
dropping stuff at Goodwill that you don't need. Don't throw anything away because somebody else can use it. Give it to Goodwill. Give it
Unless
away.
it really needs to be
If you
thrown
don't,
away.
yeah. But it's a conversation with those people that feel they're doing good by working at places like that or donating time.
I've,
It's not
I've got a,
donating at church.
I've
I'm
got a,
not donating time. This is what I'm supposed to be doing. And as in my travels, I'm going to offer it to you because I probably have went through the same thing that you're telling me is your issue today. Or I know somebody that has changed their life because they've turned it over to God.
I've got a good practical challenge. Here's a good practical
Ooh.
challenge from this,
Ooh.
right? We're talking about getting
Ooh.
our hands dirty.
Yeah.
Something that
I mean,
this is low
Taking
threshold, all
notes.
right?
He's taking notes.
practical challenge.
Practical challenge. Practical challenge. The next time you go to a Walmart or a Hy-Vee or a first, go through the checkout line and talk to the check person.
Just talk to him.
Just talk to them.
Oh,
One day,
All you have to do, I got this. I served with another associate pastor way back 20 years ago, and I went one day. We had to get stuff, and we went to, I forget, I think it was Walmart. Went to Walmart. We're getting stuff for a youth event, right? And we go to the checkout stand, and he looks at the girl and he's like, "How you doing today?" And this girl just unloads. She's like, "Horrible.
yeah,
This is terrible. All these things, and it was bad stuff." I'm like, "You really are having a bad
this
day,
is
right?"
a bad day.
But I'm like, when you think about it, that's a small challenge. Doesn't seem like much, but a genuine question to somebody of, "How are you?"
yeah.
Is it, and I'm like you, I'm like, I would rather go through the self checkout.
And-
Well, some ways I'd rather go through the self
And
checkout.
then when
I
you,
don't
like this.
when
you
you
don't like self checkout.
No.
Oh, good.
and when you ask that question, be prepared to stay there and listen. Start that relationship and say, end it. What can I do to help? What can I pray for you for? And
Yeah.
just, hey, if you want to talk to people that are going or have been through the same things that you're saying, Steadfast Church. Check us out online. Instead of the big corporations, I like doing it in the little mom and pop places, the startup companies that you build those relationships one-on-one, depending on what your new business is, your new business. Meat store, lockers. Let's get away from these big things that are not good for us. Now, like the big churches, they could be good, they could be bad. You got to pick and choose where you want to meet people.
Yeah. So I know we're getting short on time here because we've gone long, but along those lines,
Crazy hot topic.
it ties into Nehemiah. It ties into the hot topic. It's a verse that I came across here. I mean, I've known it for years and years. I've memorized it when I was a kid, but it's from First Peter, and I think it kind of wraps up everything we're talking about here. And it is First Peter. It says, "But honor the Messiah as Lord in your hearts. Always be ready to give a defense to anybody that asks you for the reason for the hope that's in you. Do it with gentleness and respect, keeping your conscience clean." Some other versions are better, but that idea of like Nehemiah's got a plan when this comes. He's ready for what is there. And when I saw that in Nehemiah, I thought, when we're getting our hands dirty, the plan for us should be, I'm living in a way that somebody is going to ask why I have the hope that I have. And two, when they ask for why I have the hope that I have an answer ready.
Mm-hmm.
And when we're doing stuff, when we're reaching out to people, like, do we have the answer to say, here's why I am doing what I'm doing, you know? Here's why I'm getting my hands dirty. I've got this hope that is founded in Jesus Christ and the Messiah who came and died for my sins. That's why I live the way that I do. Anyway, I think it's good because it just ties that whole idea together of
It does.
like,
It's all tied together.
yeah. Anyway,
I think that's a wrap then, right?
Okay.
I mean,
you're good.
episode 9 complete. Is that how that works?
Is that
I
it's
think
been
so.
that
Well, I
many?
think
Episode
9,
9.
I
This is
think the
9.
topic is still hot, though. So we may have to
We might have to circle
We
around.
might have
This
to
might be
circle-
an ongoing
throw some
topic.
more
I
water
thought we
on
solved
it.
all problems. What are you talking
No,
about?
it's fine. Yeah.
We solved it.
Okay.
Do we need to
I mean,
come in for a hug or?
Solved in here.
Yeah, right.
all right. Well, thanks everyone for watching. Next week we're still on Tuesday, 11:30. Every week we're here for some more hot topics, solving the world's problems one question at a time.
Love to have you.
Uh,
Well, are we off?